maybe you could that you could tell us just a little bit of your journey from a young person to becoming a very successful dressage rider and Olympian.
Sure. Yeah, it all started when I was 7 years old. Started riding with my sister, little ponies. And in fact, first I wasn't really that interested, because my sister kept going to this pony club and she kept bugging me to come along. And finally I gave in and loved it ever since then. And speaking of my sister, we started breaking a 3-year-old horse when I was 17, my sister was 18. That's a horse my dad got for us. It was $2,500 in those days. And this was Udon, U-D-O-N. So anytime when my sister got bucked off and got hurt, then it was my turn to get on. And then this horse actually went with me to the United States in 1985 and was sold to a sponsor, Laila Kammerstadt, in 91. And this horse also went with me to the Olympic Games in 96 in Atlanta. And the neat thing is my dad was able to see him. My dad unfortunately passed away the year after, but my dad still got to see his horse that he purchased for us for $2,500.
Wow. So Steffen, you're originally from Germany.
Mm-hmm.
What is the sort of average route for a youthful rider in Germany as compared to the United States?
Well, it starts, as I mentioned already, with the ponies. And there's a huge interest in 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old riders who do actually international competition, dressage and jumping, and actually 3-day eventing early on, where you're used to team competitions where you get used to riding under pressure.
And are there pony club, are there programs for the kids, or is it pretty much here you're in your own stable and whatever you have locally?
No, it's pretty consistent through ponies and horses. If you compete over there, let's say at a national show, you can't compete unless you belong to a riding club. So you always go together as a team to the shows, and that started early on with the ponies, as I mentioned. And then internationally, of course, it's a bit different. But yeah, you're right. You always belong to a group, to a membership.
Looking back to the time you made, what brought you to the United States?
I was always fascinated with the United States, even in school, when, especially in English. I remember one year we started discussing the American dream, and I just was completely fascinated by this. What how many opportunities you have over here. So that was always in the back of my mind after high school that I would come over here. And Laurie Falvo, who is a local trainer, she was actually at Joe Hinnemann's barn for a little while where I trained. And she invited me to come over. And that's what I did in 84. And then I still had to go back to Germany and do my army services since that's mandatory. So it's all Laurie's fault.
Looking back to the point that you made your first Olympic team, would there be anything that because that was at your youngest age for an Olympian, would there be anything that you would say you would wish you had done differently?
I wish I wouldn't have been that nervous in those days. I think I could have enjoyed it more. I did a few seasons before the Olympic Games in Europe, competing, internationally, but the Atlanta came around pretty quickly. And I still remember in Gladstone when I did the freestyle and it looked pretty good that we would make on the team. I mean, the first reaction, hey, this is great. And the next reaction, oh shit, now what? Now we got to represent the United States at the Olympic Games. So I would say, looking back, I'd say finding a way to, to be as calm as I'm, or calmer as I am nowadays, and simply enjoying it more.
Steffen, you've been pretty open about mental health and riding. I know when I was doing it, it was sort of, you just did it, you survived, and it was up to you. And there was, I remember in my entire career, there was one little speech we got, one little talk we got at Gladstone before the '88 Olympics, and that was it. What can you just give some advice to these young people and older people about this?
Yeah, very good question. I look at it this way. There needs to be, of course, the goal and the dream. There's absolutely no doubt about it, but when I look back, that I simply held on to the disappointments way too long. I remember the World Games in Tryon, things didn't go that well. And I just simply wasn't able to let go. I constantly doubting myself, saying, what, I know you have an amazing horse, but you're not quite good enough to ride him. Thank God that changed later on. But that was my thinking. So this whole idea of constantly working on a negative thought, overthinking, self-doubt, and then holding on to some resentment, so extremely destructive. And I think it's perfectly fine to have a thought, but it is not always that necessary to start thinking about this thought. So the best advice I could give someone is that it's only natural to think. I mean, of course, we've been programmed to do this for thousands of years, but it's important to think about the way we feel. That's only natural, but I find it much, much more important to think about the way we think, and learning to let go, going a little bit more with the flow of life, because shit happens, and going a little bit more with the flow of life, being kinder to myself. I was always kind to my horses, but being kind to myself, that was not always the case. It was always, you have to ride better, you have to get stronger, tougher workouts, just a little bit easier, kinder, going with the flow of life.
Thank you. You did your first Olympics in, when was that? 90?
In 96 in Atlanta.
96, yeah. And you've done every one since then, is that correct?
No, I missed the one in Sydney because my horse had colic surgery during the trials.
Yeah.
And then I was an alternate with Floriano in 2004. And then since then, yes, 2008, 12, 16, and 20.
But you've been doing this for quite a while. How do you see that dressage in general has changed, or has it? And international level specifically?
I think it's improved drastically, especially after 2008. Not sure if you still remember, Isabel had a really tough ride in the freestyle in Hong Kong. The games were in Beijing, but our venue was in Hong Kong. And the judges were still very, very generous with her. And I don't think that would happen nowadays anymore. If somebody has a bad ride, it doesn't matter what nationality you are, you're going to get the score that you deserve. So since then, since 2008, I think it has changed drastically. Horses have gotten better. The riding is better. I personally like that the stewards have more authority to say, hey, listen, you're pushing it a little bit too hard, a little bit too much with your horse. And of course, the judging has gotten a lot better since we now have supervising committees for World Games, Olympic Games, and World Cups. So I think the sport is heading in the right direction.
Can you explain, because some people may not know, what the supervisory committee does?
Sure. So let's say at the World Cup we have, or at the World Games, Olympic Games, we have 7 judges. And if the supervising committee sees that the judge gave an 8 for a horse that did make a mistake, they have the right to overrule this. So sometimes for judges, it's really hard to see from their perspective if there was a late flying change. But vice versa as well. If the judges gave a score too low for a really good movement, they can overrule this as well. So that is another reason why I think the judging internationally has become better. And we see this now, I think, throughout the panel, that there's more consistency between the judges. There he is.
I
Love that answer, Stefan. I totally agree. I was muted for a few minutes.
If Stefan will be patient a moment while we let Robert catch up.
Of course. Of course.
Robert, the first thing I asked Stefan was just a little bit about your journey to becoming one of our top riders, an Olympian, from how you started.
Yeah, for me, it was so many different coincidences that I first started riding at the age of 12, but going with a girl that lived next door to me to ride ponies that were basically like out in a little pasture, and we would catch them and put bridle on them, ride them around bareback. And then about, less than a mile from where that was a farm called Trekanen Farms, where a lady that had moved to Canada, to outside of Toronto from Germany, brought some of the very first Trekaners over to North America. And so luckily, I went over there with my friend from next door, and they put me on a horse on a lunge line, and the lady said to the other trainer, go ahead and keep doing that with this kid, even though I didn't have money really to spend for it, but they made it very inexpensive. It was like $5 for a lesson, and that was the beginning. And then from there, I went into, I moved to the Bahamas, and for $1,000, I was able to buy my first horse in Florida, fly it to Freeport, Grand Bahama Island, and work with a lady whose name was Myra Wagner. She was from the British Pony Club, and started pony clubbing, doing every kind of riding possible, from polo to endurance, dressage, jumping. We did beach rides, swimming the horses, and then moved to Florida, went to the South Florida Pony Club. And at 15, I was riding with my instructor then from Pony Club, and Colonel Youngquist, who I know you know, Lendon really knew really well. Stefan, I think that was before your time. But Colonel Youngquist was at that point the coach of our Olympic team, and he saw me at the age of 15 and took me under his wing. And I started riding with him by the time I was 16 and could drive a car. And so, yeah, that was a turning point for my life. And it allowed me to have him as a mentor. And then others followed. I went from him to, when he passed away, I started riding with Schulteis, then George Teodorescu, then Herbert Rehbein, then Rainer Klimke. And so I was very fortunate to have some of the greatest trainers of the last 100 years to help and mentor me.
we were talking about when you got on, Robert, how dressage has changed, and I don't know if what you heard of what Stefan said, but
Yeah.
would you have anything to add?
Well, I heard what Stefan said regarding his feeling that the sport has really become better over the years, and I think that's what you said, Stefan, if I'm correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, the breeding of horses has just made the sport so different than when I started in the sport, and when I even made my first few Olympic teams. It changed so much with just having these amazing horses, and also it was that instead of it being just like one country that truly sort of owned the sport and knew how to do it, there ended up being, with more good horses going around the world, also more good trainers. And I think just the sport progressed that way to where we started seeing great riders in many countries evolve with better and better horses. And now you just see in Australia, you'll see a fabulous rider with a fabulous horse. You'll see one in South America. We had this season a really wonderful rider and horse from Ecuador. He lives in North Carolina, but he represents Ecuador, and it's just changing constantly. And I really believe too, like Stefan, for the better. Beautiful riding, beautiful horses. And I agree also with what Stefan said about the supervisory panel. It has changed the sport since now the last maybe 12 years for the better as well. The judging has gotten, for the most part, especially at the top end of the sport where Stefan competes, at that level especially, you see, I think, the best judging and more uniform judging. And so, yeah, the sport has really, really evolved in the best possible way, I think.
Now, of course, I started before either of you guys. And certainly in 1980, when I first, or 78, when I first went to Europe, we had these big, massive, powerful, closer to the carriage horse of the warm bloods. And certainly as you say, the breeding's improved and the type of horses gotten so different. And the riding has had to evolve because of that different type of horse. But do you think the style of riding has changed overall? Maybe Stefan first.
I think it had to change because we're breeding, harder horses, horses with a lot more go. We see, I think overall probably a little bit more of the thoroughbred in the horses. So I think because of that, the riding had to adjust a little bit. And like I said before, the stewards are so much more involved now with the warm-ups. I mean, if you look at a show like in Aachen, a lot of people watch the show, of course, but you can have, sometimes 200-300 people around the warm-up watching you right there. So there's very, very clear communication between the show management and the riders that the warm-ups have to be already very respectful to the horse. So I think, like I said before, in general, it has led us to better riding.
Robert, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that what Stefan said is absolutely true, but also that's sort of, in a way, a sadness for me too, in that it's not, I think that through the years, there have been these great legendary riders and trainers like Rainer Klimke, like Lieslott Linsenhoff, like Rosemary Springer, like Herbert Rabine. And I think that generally they always have loved, the greats have always loved their horses and respected their horses. What has happened is that there have been, with the internet making everything happen so much faster, that we're under a microscope. And the part of me that says it's a sadness is that in other equestrian sports, if somebody posts something, says something negative about not just a rider, but the sport, you will see those athletes basically get their wagons in a circle and are ready to attack back against those who are trying to really bring down their sport. In our sport of dressage, what is sad for me is that we try to, or not we, there are people within our sport that try to bring down the sport from within. And that has been something that has made me sad over the years, where not only is it a sport that we're constantly being told we have to be kind to our horses, we have to not make them too deep too long, we have to prevent people from seeing anything that could be thought of as negative. Instead of, I think that we should defend ourselves for the beautiful sport and art that we have and that we practice, and because 99% of the time, or even more, I think that riders are doing the very best they can to be really respectful and to be really loving toward their horses. I think it's that tiny fraction maybe that are the bad apples. But I think that, you know, if you look at other sports and what happens to horses in those other sports without anybody ever saying, oh my God, look what they did to that horse. They tied it to a carriage, or, you know, put side reins on it, or put draw reins on it, or put these kind of elevator bits. Nobody ever says that about these other sports, but we end up having someone within our sport say, did you see what that rider's horse's tongue looked like in a flash of a second, or how deep it was in a flash of one picture? That's,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
Very, very well said, Aya. Yep, I totally agree with that.
Are there things about the direction in which dressage is going about which you're concerned? Steffen?
You know, they used to be. I don't think at the moment, but there used to be the idea that we take the halt and the walk out of the test. You know, so that to me was a little bit against the way I think about the sport, because I like to show and see the relaxation, you know, and that makes essentially the Grand Prix test so difficult. We have to show this amazing expression on one side and then pure relaxation and walk on the other side. So I'm glad that didn't take any roots, and it didn't, it never ended up being in the rules.
Robert, anything to add?
Yeah, I guess that for me, my biggest concern about our sport is the cost of it. It's become more and more. I can remember, Lyndon, when you and I were in Maryland at Linda Zhang's place, and my horse had passed away, and Colonel Youngquist said, I found somebody to help you to have a horse. It's in Sweden. And so get ready, make sure you have a passport, because we're going to go look at it. And I said, well, how much is it? He said, it's $30,000. And I thought, oh my God, $30,000. And this was, you know, a horse of Eric Letta's. And unfortunately, over that weekend, apparently he got bucked off of that horse. And so Colonel Youngquist said, forget that horse. But that was what a horse cost. And to me, that was a huge amount of money back in the 80s.
Yeah.
So then fast forward to now, And it's almost become impossible for, other than in a miraculous situation like for Dottie's with Laura, it's become a sport where I see these families and these kids at every year in the Horse Mastership Week that we started, Landon, and then it's gone on to be the Horse Mastership Week that the USEF does each year. And I see these kids, and I said to them this year that, you know, well, I asked them, what do you think would really change how you all are doing to be able to be competitive in Europe at the junior, the pony, or the young rider, or even U25 level? And they all said, we need better horses. It's so interesting. But I said, you know what? You're right. It's not that you're not getting the kind of training that you should have. It's that unless you have really great horses, it's very hard to compete anymore. And those great horses, instead of costing $30,000, they're costing hundreds of thousands and into the millions. And that's, I think, my biggest concern for the sport.
That kind of leads me to you both, once you got to that level, had amazing and long-term generous sponsors. What advice do you have to these young people that would help them to draw a potential sponsor? Is that fair to ask?
Yeah.
Steffen?
Robert, you want to go first?
Oh, thanks, Stefan. That's so sweet. Okay, you know what? I get asked all the time, all the time by younger riders, but also by adults. And they ask me, so there's a possibility of a horse, or there's a possibility that I could go to look for a horse, but I need a sponsor. How do I get a sponsor? And I generally, I'll bring you up, Stefan, as someone who has had the two kinds of sponsors that I speak to them about. The first way is that, or what I usually say is, in order to get a sponsor, you have to have one of two things. You have to find somebody who truly loves you and cares about you, that has the means to help you. And an example for me has been you, Stefan, with your first sponsors, the Kammerstadts, and also Günther with the Browns, and to a certain degree myself with the McPhails when they helped me. It wasn't because of seeing the end result already in front of them, of say a medals already in front of them. It was because they really cared about me. And I think these people, the Kammerstadts, I know they believed in you, but this was before you had made Olympic medals and stuff. And I think that you have to find people who really love you and want to help you. That's the first way. The second way would be the Akiko situation, where she says, listen, this guy's a star. He's a proven winner. He's going to not only do a great job for us in training and riding and competing the horses, but I believe he's going to bring back medals. And I want to be part of that. And that would be how Jane Clark came to me. And because she came to me, I had already had, I've been to a lot of games and I already had medals. She came and said, you know what, I'd like to have you ride for me. And that was the second way. So the first way is to have somebody who really loves and cares for you and wants to help you and help you on your journey. And the second way you get a sponsor, I believe, is to show proven results. And Stefan, maybe you could add other ways, but that's what I've experienced in my life.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with this 100%. But I think also, Robert, the idea of doing clinics, getting yourself out there, meeting so many wonderful people. That's how I met Akiko. I didn't know what her background was, and I taught her many times up in the Northern California area before they started approaching me. They bought a wonderful horse from me, not for me, but from me. And that was a wonderful experience for them. The horse worked out great. And there was a lot of honesty involved in those transactions. And I think that's where that trust came from. And a huge advantage was, Robert, you might agree with this, Akiko being herself a Grand Prix rider. She knows how difficult this is. And she knows when, how tough the disappointments can be. And that even though, really good horses have sometimes tests that are not good enough. So I would say this whole idea of being on the same page with the sponsor, that is huge. And I'm glad you experienced that with Jane as well.
Yeah.
Well deserved, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Same to you.
I want to back up just a moment because we had a question when you all were talking about the problems with the internet and so forth. And the question was, what are your suggestions to combat that behavior? People within taking it down. What do they think we can do? What do you think we can do to try and prevent that? Any ideas? That's a tough question. I mean,
that's unfortunately the nature of social media, that especially kids have the tendency to compare themselves or constantly try to compete or maybe even use some negative influence like this. Fortunately, that's the nature of social media. My advice would be to install a filter when we see things and we hear things. Is this really important that this needs to enter my brain? Is it really important for this to chew on for a few days? Can I let go? Is this really worthwhile my time?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that those of us who are a little older and have sort of been down the road many times, I think that we should stand up when we see or hear, especially a young person being bullied, or within the sport where there are people that go after our riders, whether they're at the international level, like in Aachen, where Steffen was talking about. I can remember there was a man and a woman who were trying to take videos from the sidelines at the warm-up area. And I can remember being with our riders there, and I said, Hallie, go stand in front of that camera. And if you move, just keep standing in front of that camera. And if they say something, you just tell them to come talk to me. And things, I mean, I do think, and that was a particular situation, but I do think that our people who are in positions where they are unafraid to speak up against those kinds of people who bully or who try to bring down our sport. I know I have, and I will continue to speak to the goodness of our community in general, and to the fact that I think 99.8% or more of the dressage riders get up every day trying to do the very best they can with what they know. And that's what I think about people in general too.
Exactly. We're going to take a very quick break while Mary does the draw. Robert, Trafalgar Square has been a sponsor of D4K from the very, very beginning, and they give us a gift certificate for each one of these. So Mary's going to draw a name for someone to receive a gift certificate. You done it, Mary?
Yes, but the first person is not on, so we're
Okay.
going with the next person. Imogen, nope. Okay, sorry,
No.
sometimes this takes a minute until
Next.
Emily Evanson.
Speak up if you're on.
Nope,
Okay, next.
a lot of names these days because we've done so many Zooms. Olivia Wilkins. I see an
So-
Olivia. I don't know if it's the
Olivia
right
Wilkins on?
Olivia. Yes,
Ah,
Olivia.
good. Okay, so Mary will be in touch with you afterwards. And this is probably a good moment, since we're talking about books, to do a little advertising for you, Robert. Robert has a wonderful book out there called The Gates to Brilliance. And I recommend it very, very highly. It's really very good. And Stefan, I'm waiting for yours.
Yeah, well, I think
Keep
I need to
waiting,
retire first, and
Okay.
then
Well,
do
don't
that.
do
But
that yet.
to be honest, I didn't know about Robert's book. I'm going to look it up. Robert, when did this come out?
Came out about, let's see, it'll
2
be
years ago?
years, yeah, in November. Is
Nice.
time, and so yeah, it wasn't a huge fanfare, but it's nice, and it's now in stores all around the world, and so that's
Great.
been, and I've made, like, I can tell you, from when you write a nonfiction book, you can be pretty sure that you're going to make hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
And,
So
and
the labor of love.
everyone on here, Trafalgar Square, gives a 20% discount, is it, Mary, or 25? 20% discount to anyone that puts in the code D4K 2023. Is that right, Mary?
Yep, I'm gonna put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. So you both do some clinics, and you work with people around and about. I wonder, what do you find is the lesson or the lessons that you are teaching most often? What are the areas that the riders, aren't perhaps paying quite enough attention to? Stefan?
I think the most important lesson that I teach is about the contact and the horse's reaction to the leg aid. I mean, people get eventually the seat aid, but really understanding what the contact is all about. And specifically, what I mean there is making a horse so supple, so correct and respectful and accepting the bit, so that we later on, when we allow a horse to go a little bit more into the bridle, or when we push a horse into the hand, that it doesn't escalate, that the horse doesn't get so strong where we just think about a fancy, expressive moving horse, but now we have mouth issues and tongue issues, and the horse might move big, but the connection is not comfortable or not good enough. I find this most important. And then for the second part, I still need to give Robert a lot of credit there. This whole idea of, especially when it comes to piaffe passage and pirouettes, that it's perfectly fine for the horses to make a mistake. Instead of us saying, keep going, keep going, keep going, it's okay to be briefly a little bit passive with the leg aid, and then finding out if the horse is willing to continue even with a little bit less pressure from the leg. And that's what I learned from Robert in the early days in 96, 97. And that stuck with me, that it's absolutely okay to be briefly passive and not ride every single step with the horse.
Yeah,
Robert?
Stefan hit it right. on the nail. It's the connection. And I think that, people think generally that the half halt is always like a means to the end. And while it is the doorway through which we make every change of bend and of balance, of gait, of movement, and of pace, it is the thing that we're constantly practicing to perfect. And when we can call our horse to a perfect state of balance and attention from half halt to half halt, we really have, in the end, hopefully, that beautiful contact, that beautiful connection that Steffen was talking about, and a rider who is able to use the lightest possible aids to have the grandest possible results.
I think, and I'm speaking now because we do have a lot of, excuse me, young people on here. And I certainly run into it so often of, do I buy my child, or does the teenager get an older schoolmaster that maybe isn't going to last for a long time? Or is it better, because we don't have a lot of money to spend, so do we spend it on an older schoolmaster, or do we buy them a young horse and let them train it and bring it up? Don't everybody speak at once.
Yeah, Robert, you go first on that one.
So here's what I know from my own experience, my career, my life, that I was so fortunate that at the age of 15, I was able to ride Elizabeth Lewis's horses that were Grand Prix horses that she was trying out for the team on. And they allowed me to feel things that I would have not known were correct, and were just beautiful feelings that I never forgot by having those horses available to me. So I guess the answer for me to that question is, it depends upon the situation of the child. If they are with a wonderful trainer who has great horses that child can ride and learn from without having to purchase that older or more schooled horse, and have the younger horse with that child with a really great trainer, then that can work that way. But without that like lovely schooled horse, it will, without a great trainer to guide the way for that young person with a young horse, it will probably be a more difficult path.
Good. Steffen, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's so wonderful that we had, both Robert and I had those opportunities when we were young. And I always made my point, with Akiko's permission, of course, that when we have some young riders at the barn, they have been on Mopsy. They understand that it's not necessarily always a forceful rhythmic A to just get a piaffe done, that it could be ridden with a very, very quiet leg with the heels down. Just the kids understand it is possible to ride in such a way, and horses can learn to respond that way with the proper training. So I always make my point of allowing kids to ride very advanced horses. So I might get a few phone calls after this session. So that's okay. It's okay.
I have to just tell a quick story, Robert, because at that period that you were talking about with Elizabeth Lewis, I was doing sort of second level training with Colonel Ljungqvist, and he got me a short ride on Ludmilla, Elizabeth's horse that she had brought, what she'd ridden in the World Championships with. And I'd never done anything except sort of shoulder in and stuff. And he said, "Oh, go over there and do some piaffe." So piaffe, trot in place, right? So I set myself down in the saddle and I clamped my legs on and I grabbed her mouth, because you had to, make it work. And she very, very sweetly reared, not high, but of course that was exactly what I had told her to do. And I still, I mean, I was what, 20 or something, have that, what I learned from that one quick moment, that it isn't kick and pull,
Yeah.
you know? Those opportunities are just amazing.
Yeah.
I want to catch up with a question. What are your thoughts on the CDI rule that in order to compete in FEI pre-St. George, the rider has to be 16 or older? Is there a reason for the age restriction? What do you think about younger being allowed to ride St. George?
I have never thought about this question. And to be honest, I didn't know that rule existed. So, gosh, if somebody is ready at 14, 15 to ride at the upper levels, I can only imagine how competitive this person would be at the young riders level. So it's probably not a great rule, but the
I didn't know it
young
was a
riders
rule.
test, the young riders test is probably not that far apart from the pre-St. George.
It is a pre-St. George.
It's the same. Is that
Yeah,
is that a
there you
rule?
go.
I mean, I've known kids that have ridden St. George in national shows. What do you think about, let me just ask this because I run into it a lot. The pressure the kids are under they've got to go out and get their medals, their bronze, silver medals. And I hear all the time, I've got to find a horse because I've got to get my silver medal, or I've got to find a horse to get my last score for my bronze. There seems to be, those medals give a goal, but do those goals get too strong? Are they learning to ride, or are they just going after their medals?
I think either way, we got to have those goals. But first of all, whatever goal we pick, we just have to commit to that 100%. And just thinking back from a couple of weeks ago from the World Cup, I told myself that physically and mentally and with the utmost kindness, I had to prepare Mopsy and myself. And since I felt that I did this 100%, I was going to be 100% okay with the outcome. And I think that's all we can do when it doesn't matter if we pursue the bronze, silver, or gold medal at a different or national level. It doesn't matter. If we commit and do every single day exactly what it takes, and that's not just the performance in the arena, that's the own fitness and watching our diets a little bit, I think then we should be okay with the outcome.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think too, I mean, I go back so far that when I was young and in the sport, there weren't those medals. Yeah. And certainly the dream of most young people in sports that are within the Olympic family is to go on the Olympic team for your country. And I think that that is most people's dream. But I remember as a kid, what I wanted was to be really good. I wanted to be like great at whatever I was going to undertake, whether that was at school or with horses or playing soccer. I wanted to be really good at whatever it was that I was wanting to do. And the byproduct of trying to attain excellence is generally being competitively successful. So I think that that's maybe the best way to look at it. And like Steffen said, be okay with the results, including failures. And I always tell people that I took failure to the form of art through my career. So many, even after I had been on Olympic teams and world championship teams, I still had some major, major failures in some of the biggest arenas of the world. And at that moment, of course, it didn't make me happy that I had them, but looking back on my life and my career, those major failures were pathways to success and also to being okay, like Steffen said, with even those moments, and realizing that those moments, how they define you is how you deal with them, the bad, the good, and everything in between. How you deal with them with grace is really what defines, I think, the person, as much as whether they get a medal or not.
Super. We have a question specifically about training. How much groundwork do you do with your horses? Prepping for the atmosphere of competition or things like jogs that can get exciting? Stefan, I know you've done some work with Mopsy, right?
Yeah, and not just that, but also with stallions before in Germany,
Mhm.
where we try to teach them just by walking next to a horse when we stop, that the horse stops without necessarily touching the reins, the lead rope, and just this mutual respect. I look at my horses that they're business partners. I can love my business partner for sure, but for that 1 hour when we work together, there has to be mutual respect, just like in a really good marriage. You can love someone, but without respect, it doesn't work. So yes, the groundwork, really important. Horses, I think, should learn also, like I said, that they pretty much respect half faults from the ground. And I look at it also when I lunge a horse, I'm not interested in constantly chasing a horse forward. I ask for the canter, and if a horse breaks to the trot, I push them quickly back to the canter. So there's early on this communication, and again, it comes back to a lot of mutual respect.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think the groundwork helps to create a kind of bonding. So it creates that kind of respect. Also, I think that, especially with stallions, but with all horses, we need to be, to a certain degree, the alpha. And meaning that if they begin to believe that they can run over us or rear up on us or strike, especially a stallion, or turn their butts towards us and threaten us, in those moments, in a way that still understands that we're not attacking them, we're not going to beat them, but what we are going to do is persist in letting them know that they can trust us and follow us and understand with confidence what it is that we're asking them to do. And from the ground, I find that they end up being like a dog that loves us and that looks at us like the human alpha in their world, such that they look at us and they realize they can trust us, but also they should be obedient to our will in that moment, and then they get a reward for that. So the whole idea of correction and reward gives them actually a set of boundaries within which they live and actually become happy and confident animals with those kind of boundaries. And in truth, we all live with those boundaries. If we're in a marriage, we end up with our spouse having a set of rules or things that we agree to. And those agreements are things that make us both confident in each other and happy and content.
Super.
Yeah,
Um,
I really like the idea with what Robert mentioned with the dog. I mean, when we start training a young puppy, there's a much better chance that this dog comes around and wants to be with us. I see so many horses that are just started a little bit too late, where negative habits kick in. So I love that comparison with just like training a young puppy.
Yeah.
There've been so many gems for our young people to think about and carry forth. Do you have anything to add, any advice to our young riders of today, both those that aspire and are now competing at quite a high level? We have some of those on here, but we also have some that are still riding their sort of backyard horse and doing their very, very best at training level. Any thoughts to leave with them?
I think what Robert just said before, knowing that there might be disappointments, and Robert might think, but looking back, said, well, that sounds like a hypocrite, because Robert has seen me in plenty of situations where I held on to disappointments way too long. So this whole idea of letting go, learning, and going a little bit more with the flow of life, and truly believing that that winning can happen. I find it much more important to believe in that, instead of always knowing 100% how to get there. And that also leads me to my final comment. When I think about for instance, the World Cup or any other major competition, it's not only that I visualize going through the test, I picture myself being on Mopsy, the view that I have on Mopsy. I know what that arena looks like. I know what it smells like. I know what the temperature is in there. And I also imagine, when things go really well, how I would react to that, putting a really strong emotion into that goal, into the visualization. I might even know what I might tell the press if things go well. So this whole idea of setting very positive neural pathways in your brain, I find that very important, not just for dressage, but in any sport.
That's super interesting. That is, I believe, great athletes. So you kids that are on, or whoever's listening and watching, what Steffen just said is truly the biggest key to not just success in the dressage arena, but having a successful life. Being able to visualize your success, your happiness, how you're going to dance with your horse around the arena in the next hours or the next days. And I always talk about Isabelle Baird, because she is the embodiment of someone who has self-realized all of her career, I believe, and has seen every single great success of hers well before she was in the arena itself. She is someone who knows exactly what is going on underneath her. Even if there's a little mistake here and there, she knows in that moment exactly not just what it looks like from where she's sitting, but what it looks like from where the judges are sitting and the audience is sitting. And so that kind of self-awareness comes from experience, from exposure, and from doing it again and again, which Steffen has done so successfully, and our great athletes in the U.S. Equestrian team, whether they're jumper riders or 3-day riders or reining riders or dressage riders, they are constantly seeing the grandest version of themselves on their horses, performing well ahead of the moments that they're actually doing it. And I think that yeah, that's the key, whether that's about riding or about life.
But
Fantastic.
Robert, what I find
ahead.
so interesting in those situations when I visualize and when I think about what the test could feel like when I'm done with it and possibly holding a medal up or a trophy up, I guarantee you that my brain sometimes doesn't know the difference if I'm already in the arena or if I'm just acting this. I bet you my brain doesn't know the difference.
I love it. Yeah, that's
Perfect.
it. That is it.
This has been fantastic. Thank you both so much. I just want to finish saying these two gentlemen who've had such amazing success started out with their riding their ponies, as we heard about, where many of you are now. And I just want to read something that is in the comments, because I hope that these young people listening today will have someone's write a comment about you that I'm going to read right now, that you're going to present yourself in a way that these two gentlemen have. This is from, I don't know if it's from Kaylee or Kaylee and McLean are siblings. And the comment is, first, thank you both for sharing your time with us tonight. My parents took me to the recent World Cup in Omaha to watch Mr. Peters. Watching him perform was a life memory for me. I also was lucky enough to meet Mr. Peters at a restaurant. Thank you, Mr. Peters, for being so gracious when meeting young riders. I aspire to ride like you in the future and treat people as kindly as you do now. So,
Oh, that's
thank you.
wonderful.
Isn't that lovely?
That's very kind. You know, speaking of restaurants, when I was in Omaha and I had pretty much dinner every night in the hotel, there is not a single meal that I paid for. There was always somebody who picked up the tab, and most of the time I didn't even know who it was. So that was very, very generous, and that honestly means a lot.
Fantastic. Well, you have, I don't know if you two can see the chats, but you're getting lots and lots of thanks. Thank you so much for giving of your time. Whoops. It was an honor to have you share your knowledge with us. What a wonderful night. Thank you so much for all the insight, etc. So,
And,
gentlemen, thank you very, very much.
Lendon, I just
Yes.
want to say one thing. Thank you again, Lendon, for all you do with D4K, but also for kids and young people and adults in the United States, how great you've been and how much of an impact you've been over all these years. It's really, really something that we should all applaud.
Thank you, Robert.
Yes, agreed, 100%. Thank you, Landon.
Okay, well, thanks, everybody. It's been a great evening, and I look forward to seeing you all again.
Take care.
Thank you. And bye, Robert. Good to see you.
Bye. Take care, Stefan.
Bye-bye.